Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. And my guest today is Marc Staut. Marc, thank you for being on this episode of the podcast.
Happy to be here, Jon.
Marc is our Chief Innovation and Technology Officer. And Marc, I've heard you speak on this topic before, but it's all around, does your data tell a story? And I think what's going to be fun about this conversation is one of your favorite things is data and helping firms use it. One of my favorite things is helping firms tell a story in their messaging. And I love that you kind of married these two topics together. And so can you just explain to our audience, maybe the importance of how to leverage data in a way that tells a compelling story? Why should firms even be thinking about this?
Yeah, so one of the real challenges, everybody's talking about data, right? How do we leverage it? How do we generate business insights? How do we help our clients with it? Is it predictive? Is it prescriptive? There's so many pieces that go around. And what very few people are talking about is the way that we present our data is also super, super important, right? Because if it's just a bunch of statistics, I hear those things, I can acknowledge what you're telling me, 80%, 20%, 2 points growth, whatever it is that you're looking at, but we feel the stories that go along with them. So this is kind of taking a little bit of analytics and a little bit of psychology and putting the two things together to say, well, how are we going to really make sure that what we want people to be hearing is what they're taking away from this? We want them to have a visceral, emotional reaction to this data, good, bad, or indifferent. And so we need to make sure that we are presenting our information in a way that, honestly, it has a narrative that goes along with it.
Yeah. And, Marc, you and I, among others, facilitate multiple circles, right? And I don't believe that there is a function of the firm, an area of the firm that is not actively asking themselves, how can we better use data to get a message across? I was just with our talent circle audience, top HR talent leaders, and we actually had a whole session on how they could visualize data in terms of how they interpret it to their, audience, all internal data, but being able to visualize that. And so I think we can point to each function of the firm, and this topic is extremely relevant. So as firms kind of approach this, right, maybe they have some data, maybe they're pulling it from a couple different systems. Maybe they got a couple spreadsheets that include some survey information or, things to get systems to talk together. What's your tips or approach for how they should tackle this?
Yeah, I think what you just said there is super, super important, Jon. Don't be thinking that this has to be some particularly challenging, difficult data set, right? You don't need a data analyst or a data scientist to be pulling this information. You don't have to have Power BI or Tableau or anything. It can be as simple as a spreadsheet and the graphing features that are in there. And notice I do say the graphing features because one of the most important things you can do, you have to have your data, but those visuals really make it easier for people to understand. It really builds that enlightenment for them so they can see differently what it is you're trying to present. So if I tell you that there's a 50% increase in something, and you can look at the spreadsheet and say, oh yeah, 50%. But then you look at a graphic that shows it going like this, this huge upward curve, looks more like a hockey stick than anything. You're like, oh, wow, that's a lot, right? You just have a different level of reaction. So putting together your data with your visuals, and then those visuals can engage people and give you the opportunity to explain what you're seeing there. Again, I mentioned narrative earlier, so think about what it is that you want people to hear and recognize, but also what is it, how do you want them to react, and then what do you want them to do afterwards? Those are all critical points.
I think that's excellent advice, Marc. And one thing I heard in another session on this was the presenter said, hey, the worst the worst reaction you can get when presenting data to someone is confusion. So, so I love your point where you said, "Hey, it's more about getting that visceral reaction, whether it's positive or negative. It's not our job to get people to like make people feel good through data. It's through telling the truth and kind of getting that information, you know, out there. And so I love all your tips around, okay, how do we reduce confusion so people truly understand, the impact of it. Can you share a little bit about some common tools maybe you've seen firms use in data?
Yeah, you actually you mentioned surveys, and surveys are super, super powerful. Whether it's just getting traditional rankings like customer service rankings, or how do things feel for people, we're seeing more and more use of surveys internally inside of firms as well as externally with clients. Well, what do we do with all that data? Do we generate oh, we got a 4.29 out of XYZ as an average? Okay, that doesn't necessarily tell us anything. Now if we take that data and we put it into a tool, once again as simple as Excel, and we map that out, and we're not looking at that average line per se, but we're looking at the spread of all of the different responses there, then we can start to look for outliers, and we can say, whoa, this person over here actually answered very, very differently than everybody else. What drove that? I can take a look at that and say, okay, something's not right here, because that average may be telling me things are okay. But if I've got 5 people or 10% or 20% of people who are all of a sudden outliers, well, now I know that I've got something else that I need to go and address. And again, it can be as simple as a survey tool like Alchemer or something like that, and putting that into Excel and using different maps that come with Excel just to see how that data looks when it's presented in different ways.
So I guess one thing you said earlier on was, firms don't need to go crazy and go hire some expensive data expert right out of the
Right.
gate, and, things of that sort. But have you seen it successful where maybe firms want to dip their toe in this? Maybe they hire a data intern that really doesn't know much about the accounting profession, but
Yeah.
they understand data and they understand systems and they understand how to ask questions and get answers and then create data to help push toward that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, surprisingly, it's even easier than that. That's a good thought to go out and get an intern, but in reality, most firms have that level of skill already in their firm. A lot of the people who are coming out of schools these days have been exposed to data analytics and working with data sets, as well as the trends and whatnot. It's part of their course curriculum. Not every school is going to be at the exact same level, but before you start to go and look for something outside of your firm, send an email out and say, hey, does anybody have any experience working with data sets? And see what you get back. You may find that you've got a gem that you didn't even know about, or maybe even a few of them that are there. So we have talent that has these skills in our firms, and we just haven't been clever enough to ask
Yeah.
the right people the right questions just yet.
Yes, that's so true. Um, so speak to me about maybe some stories or some experiences where you've been in a firm, and maybe they're doing this well, probably not in totality or, but they're probably dipping their toe in it. They have maybe some data projects going on internally, things of that sort. Can you speak to any kind of results they've been able to experience or have, even if it's just learning through kind of moving forward in this area?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways that a lot of firms do when they start analyzing the way that the work flows inside of their own firm, specifically, they're pulling data from their workflow application, and they're looking at the way that work is being processed. All of a sudden, what they generally find is that the measures that they've been using, things like utilization and realization, time honored statistics or metrics in most CPA firms aren't necessarily telling them the entire story. So they're able to start pulling more insightful information, like how long does it take us to actually produce something for our clients? From the time that we get the very first information to the time that something goes out the door. How long does it take us to do it from the time that we get the first information? How long are we waiting for the rest of that information? And so they're able to actually have a few strategic insights that they can apply to efficiency and effectiveness throughout their firm. It's going to make things flow smoother. It's going to make sure that people are utilized better. There's that term again, but it's also going to drive profit. And so you're just looking again for those outliers. Now, I will say before people go and just start saying, "Oh, here's the data set. Let me jump in and see what I can learn." What you really want to do is actually flip that around. You actually want to identify what the business objective is first, and then go and look for the data that will give you those insights, good, bad, or indifferent insights. But so don't go say, "Here's a data set. Now let me see what I can learn." This is much more of a, hey, I'm trying to determine how I can improve the work quality or the time of delivery or the overall life cycle of production. Ask a good business question, say, okay, now what do I need from a data standpoint that's going to drive those insights? So always ask those questions first. Don't go looking for a problem to solve by throwing data at it.
Right. No, that's good. And one question that popped up for me as you were kind of giving those examples is firms understanding or what's causing our capacity constraints, because it's really easy for a firm to say, well, not enough people, but that's one data point, right, of probably multiple that make up the full story. And so as we hear more and more about capacity and increasing capacity and managing capacity constraints, I think data plays a huge role in that. And so
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at employee data, and are we leveraging our resources as best as we can? Do we have the right people working on the right things? Or do we have people who are spending a lot of time on things that maybe they're not ideally suited to be trying to solve? That can all come from data insights as well.
yeah, or is 80% of our revenue coming from 20% of our clients?
You got
And
it.
80% of our headaches coming from 20% of our clients, and all
Yep.
those things. Yeah, that's really interesting. Something I've heard too, Mark, with firms. I know one firm in particular, they did hire a data intern, and that data intern has now turned into a full-time employee, and they're doing internal projects. But there's already this vision in place that what that data steward or that data specialist is going to be able to do internally, they're going to be able to do externally for clients as well. So start to
Yep.
create, I mean, that could be a whole nother episode just on
Absolutely.
that, but it sounds like you're hearing that as well, maybe in conversations.
Oh, for sure. Firms get excited and they start talking about the things they're doing internally, and then their clients go, "Wow, that would be great. Is that something you can help us with?" Why, yes, we could. You need to have a plan and a strategy for doing that. But absolutely, if your firm is looking to solve some of those issues, to generate those insights, to start really building that narrative, that story around data, you can bet that a lot of your clients are as well.
Yeah. So, one question we always like to ask is, how is this topic relevant to outside the profession? So, Mark, I know you're plugged in, especially from a technology perspective, just globally around trends and things of that sort. Is this a larger trend that's happening across all professional services, across all areas of business?
Yeah, all areas of business, not just professional services. The trendy phrase is, making data-driven decisions. So you take the qualitative aspect of it out, meaning that I have a feeling that we should do this, and you're able to put in a quantitative perspective, meaning that, well, the data says that our clients are looking for this, they're anticipating this, or that these are opportunities that we can apply to our own business and build that story around what we're looking for. So yeah, this is something that's been pretty big in other professions for quite some time now, several different years, and it's getting a lot of momentum. Now, I will say that a lot of firms and a lot of companies still don't believe that they are making fully data-driven decisions. It's something like 30 to 40% of them feel like they're actually there. So there's still time to look at this as a strategy and say, yeah, we want to be a leader in this area, and how can we apply it to our firm?
Yeah. And when you think about how much data accounting firms are sitting on, both just with their internal business and how to, better understand their internal business, plus their clients, I mean, it's a huge opportunity.
It's
So,
significant. Absolutely.
yeah. All right. So, as we finish up our conversation here, Mark, what's maybe the next step or two someone could take after listening to this episode?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that people could do. One is educate yourself on data storytelling. There's a couple of different books that are out there. Effective data storytelling is one of them. The Data Detective is another one that I would recommend. So doing some light reading on those types of things. But the other thing that I would recommend people do is think about their processes and the way that they do things in the firm. Are those processes optimized? And can you use data to generate insights into those processes where you can really increase your effectiveness and your efficiency and leverage your resources better? So as usual, the technology goes right along with the processes, and the two work together to create some real rocket fuel.
Absolutely. Okay, Mark. Well, as always, it's a pleasure having you on the podcast. And for our listeners, we release new episodes every Tuesday morning. We like to mix up the topics between leadership, talent, technology, process, and growth. But the common theme is these are topics that we believe are really relevant to your firm and your future. So thanks for listening, and please subscribe. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, John. I appreciate you.